It's the third Friday of May 2023 and a time for the AfriGO Conversations of the month. Today, I'm honored to host not just a mobilizer, but a personal friend and a mentor. Please welcome Harriet Ngugi to the conversation. Welcome, Harriet.
Thank you, Mercy. Thank you for having me here.
Harriet is the co-founder of Missions Campaign Network in Kenya and a missions mentor for Pioneers UK. Harriet, you left us and went to the UK. Can you please tell us, why did you go?
So my husband and I are married to Sam Ngugi, and I have 2 boys. We moved from Kenya to the UK in 2018, December. And we came, first of all, to further our education in mission, because we've been involved in mission since 2010, mission mobilization in Kenya. And so as we continued, we saw the need, and we also felt led by God to further our education in mission. So that was the first reason that we came. Okay. But we also came to have a cross-cultural experience in mission. It's something that we have always desired, and so we wanted to have that experience. So if we were going to study, we preferred to study somewhere that is not our primary culture, so that we can learn. And also we desired to be involved a bit in mission mobilization in another context. So, and having done a little bit of research and read about the UK, particularly London, and how there are many people from different cultures and nationalities here, we felt like we really wanted to be there to participate in whatever that was happening. So that's why we came.
You have done missions in Africa, and I know you involved quite a bit with that in the West as well. And you mentioned that you went there because you wanted to experience the cross-cultural differences in missions from where you are and in Kenya and in the UK. So how different are these two scenarios culturally, especially in regard to the people you're reaching now and the ones you reached in Kenya?
Well, yeah, so the UK is in Europe, and as most of us know, it is a post-Christian society, meaning that before the society was predominantly Christian, but now it has changed. You will still sense some underlying Christian values in the society, in the culture of the people, but generally speaking, you will not find that many people understand Christian language. And so that, compared to, for example, Kenya, is very different. In Kenya, you can talk in a very Christian way and many people will understand a Christian language, but here it will sound strange to some people. The other thing is that this is a very secular society. Again, many people think more in terms of natural things. That's how they rationalize things. Whereas in Africa, we move from spiritual to natural, just and back and forth very easily. We are able to see things like that. The other thing that is very different is that this is a more individualistic society, whereas in Africa, we are more communal. Now, this being an individualistic society means that the way people view things like sin, the way people view salvation is very different. The way people view personal responsibility. And so this affects how you share the gospel, what kind of language you use. That's a very different worldview compared to a communal society. Yeah, and finally, the other big difference is that here, talk of religion and talk of God, generally speaking, is a private affair. It's not something that you do in the public. And so for many people, they find that to be a very private thing, very personal thing. You don't just sit with somebody or meet with somebody and start asking them about their belief in God. They find that to be a very personal thing. Whereas, of course, in Kenya, that's something that you talk to anybody, even a stranger, even without a lot of introduction, and people will not find that to be strange. So those are the general differences. But even though those are general differences, you'll also find that because the society is very cosmopolitan, a very complex society, you will find that there's a difference even from one city to another. You will find that there's a difference from one person to another. So it's very varied. Yeah.
So Harriet, you are mobilizing Africans in the diaspora for missions. What did you see that made you first think, something needs to be done here? What was it?
Yeah, so as I had said earlier, we already came with the mind to mobilize. So it wasn't really a moment that we found that we need to do something now. And also, when we came here, we found a mobilizing movement already going on, because there has been a lot of discussions about Africans in the diaspora and how they should be involved in mission, about reverse mission. And so there has been many people that, just wanted to say, let's wake up as the African church in the diaspora, let's do this. And so we really just joined that movement. But personally, I also believe in the involvement of all God's people in mission. And that's not the reality. When you look all around, that's not true. That's not what really happens in practice. You'll find that many of us are not really involved, and that's a reason for me to be involved in mobilization. And the other reason that's really a motivating factor is the potential of the African church in the UK. First of all, the numbers. The African church here is big, is considerable. For example, when you look at the African church compared to the population of the African people, you'll find that it's really big. Let's just look at London alone. Statistically, 14% of the population in London are Black people. I mean, Africans, Afro-Caribbean, and any kind of Black people. But of those, in church attendance, in terms of church attendance, 60% of people who go to church in London every Sunday are Black, Africans, Afro-Caribbean. So you can see among the Africans, there's a big church that needs to be mobilized. If that church was involved, that would be a very big thing. But the other aspect of the potential of the African church is the passion for prayer and evangelism. Africans here, just like home, or maybe even from my observation, a little bit even more than back at home, are very passionate about prayer. They observe things happening in society, and they translate that into prayer. So there are prayer movements and such things. So there's a lot of passion for prayer and passion for evangelism. It's not an easy place to evangelize, but you see people having that passion to evangelize. And so that to me is part of the potential. And the other aspect of the potential is how much Africans interact with people of all classes, because many Africans are working in community, they are working in health. So the kind of jobs where Africans are found are places where they interact with diverse people. And so there's a lot of potential for sharing the gospel. So if all these people are mobilized and are actively involved, then there's a lot of gain in the kingdom. Yeah, so that's why we mobilize.
With all this potential that you see, what, in your opinion, then, would you say hinders the African Christians in the diaspora from reaching out effectively?
Yeah. So I will say the first thing is lack of intentionality.
Okay.
So just like most of other Christians, I think generally we Christians know that sharing the gospel is something that we need to do, is something that is important, but we struggle when it comes to actually intentionally sharing the gospel, intentionally organizing our lives, structuring our time, structuring our effort. So that's the first thing. And this is, people are very busy here. It's a very fast kind of society. So you find that people are very busy, and the thinking is, I'll be able to share the gospel as opportunities arise. But the problem is, if we don't have an intentionality, like I will create structures that help me share the gospel, then even when opportunities arise, we may not see them. So that's one of the main hindrances. But the other thing is cultural differences, which are massive. So we have, most of us Africans speak English right from our countries. So when we come, we may not struggle with English, or we may speak, some of us speak French, those who come from French-speaking countries. So we speak European languages, that's what I'm trying to say. And that can sometimes make us think that we can understand the culture just because we can hear what people are saying. We are not struggling with that, but the culture is very different, like really huge differences. And many of us Africans don't try very hard to learn the culture, at least not intentionally. We hope to pick it up as we go, but that kind of learning of culture cannot be enough for sharing the gospel. So we may not share the gospel in a way that makes sense, because it's very different how we share the gospel back in Africa and how we share the gospel here. So culture is a very big difference. We need to learn culture. It's but the other thing that is a hindrance from my point of view is lack of or very little discipleship. Okay. So that's a problem across the church, but it is a problem, particularly in the African church, where we may not really understand the gospel in a way that we can explain to someone else in a rational way, or in a way that is systematic, that another person can understand. The question is, do we really understand the gospel? Are we growing in the Lord? Are we being transformed in our knowledge? Are we being transformed in our character in such a way that now then that can be shared, because you cannot give what you don't have. So that's also an issue, discipleship.
Wow, thank you very much, Harriet, for that. Now, in light of these hindrances that you've noted, if there's a Christian who is in the diaspora, especially in the Western church, and they would feel like they would want to reach out, what practical strategies can they employ to reach the Western church?
So besides prayer, besides prayer, which is not the reason I'm saying besides prayer, that's a given. That's important. Prayer is a strategy. But the other important thing is partnership. Okay. Partnership is very important because it helps us to learn from other people. When you come here, one of the things that you will notice immediately is how we are very segregated. The Christians, the church is very segregated. We have the African church, white British church, and other diaspora. And you will not see a lot of mixing. There's a lot of talk and growth in multicultural church. But in reality, we still have a long way to go. There are many people that are putting effort, but we still have a long way to go. And also, when you go even to the African church, you will find it is the Kenyan church, the Ghanaian church, the Nigerian church. And you might even be surprised that even when you go to the Kenyan church, it's Kikuyus predominantly, or you'll find Luos predominantly, or you go to the Ghanaian church, you find it's a Twi church. So it's a very unfortunate thing that happens, and many people are trying to solve it. If we were to work together, we learn a lot from each other. We are able to learn from the white British church, where the indigenous peoples, we learn a lot of these things that you're talking about, even like culture. You learn effective strategies of evangelism and discipleship because you're interacting with the people. So learning of culture is also the second thing after we talk about partnership. Learning culture intentionally, not hoping to pick it up. And of course, you learn culture from the people themselves. So that's important. But another important thing, and this is for all people that are wanting to reach out, all God's people, missionaries, is incarnational ministry. Just getting in there, getting immersed into the community, participating in the things that they are doing. Now, because of cultural differences, this is usually very hard because we want to be, we also, social circles are also welfare. They are all, we want our community to take care of us because we are far away from home. And so you will find that people live with each other, like Kenyans live together because of it's necessary. It's a need also that is being met. And how much time do you have, to be able to have Kenyan friends, to have white British friends, to have Indian friends? It becomes difficult. And so there's that issue that makes it difficult. But if you are intentionally here, knowing that you're here as a missionary, you're here to reach out, then you get out into the community and look for opportunities to be immersed in the community, even in activities that are not culturally comfortable or culturally natural for an African to be involved in. So those are some of the strategies.
What cultural differences was the hardest for you being in the West, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, the most difficult one for me is the personal space, the difference between personal and public space. Like, what is private? Sometimes what I interpreted to be private, I would find to them that's not private, and people will discuss it freely. So, for example, if I share about something about my child, pray for my child, I expect that someone will immediately think that is private. But it's very easy to find that another person knows, and they don't even think there's anything wrong with that. And they come and ask me, I understand we are praying about this concerning your son. and I'm thinking, oh, that was supposed to be private. How do you know that? But then what I think should be public is private. For example, like I just said earlier, deep discussions about God and about how you're growing in the Lord, how you're relating with God to us, especially in Christian circles, was you just sit down with someone at breakfast and start talking about your prayer life and how you're dealing with God. But I find that is very private here. And only very close friends will do that. So within a short time, I started feeling like, we are just talking about the weather. We are just talking about things that to me are very superficial. I want to go deeper. I want to make real friends. That was really difficult at first. How have I learned? I have learned, it takes time. to make friends. It takes time everywhere, even in Kenya, to make real friends, but it takes maybe a longer time to make friends here. And so that patience, investing in relationships, and also, managing your expectations when it comes to friendships. So that's how I have learned.
That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing that personal note with us. Now, if there's an African who is a Christian in the diaspora, and they want to break away from the little clusters that you mentioned, and they would want to reach out to the Western church, what tips would you give them? Someone wants to preach the gospel to the Westerns in his circle. What tips would you give them?
The first thing I think that always works is, overcome inertia. Overcome that first reluctance to reach out, that first fear of rejection, which will be there, because there's also considerable hostility towards Christianity in particular, because of the history and the background. Somehow there's also a lot of misconceptions about what is real Christianity. So it creates a lot of fear. That's normal. I think many of us would fear to be rejected. It creates, and also the differences in culture. Sometimes I have met many Africans, many Kenyans, friends of mine, who will say, the question is not whether I want to do it. The question is, where do I start? And, we find ourselves just putting it off, therefore, and just hoping that one time we will get an opportunity. We find that people are also, getting to a place where they're saying, okay, the second generation of immigrants, our children, because they can speak the language in the same way, with the same accent, they can understand the culture because they have been to school. We will leave it to them to preach the gospel. But, I believe that God wants us to reach out today while we are alive, and then we will be a good example to our children. God wants to use us today. So overcoming inertia is very important by being intentional, planning our lives, organizing our lives in order to do this. And when we start, then we find that we learn, we grow, because something is usually difficult before you engage in it. Once you start engaging with it, then you grow in it. So that will be the first thing. But the second thing is consistency.
Okay.
Not just when there is, or not when you read an article and you get challenged that weekend, you're going out there and trying to know people. You see, the kind of evangelism that you'll have to do here has to do with relationships, getting to know people very closely, getting to know how they think and what really are their needs, what kind of questions are they asking, and then engaging with them in a critical way, So that means we have to be consistent. We have to have a long view of this kind of thing. You have to have a relationship with people. And so consistency is very important. And then I'll say, let's understand the power of the gospel. It is not really up to us to convince people. We should make sense, but it is not really our burden. The gospel is powerful, and God is at work. God is actively at work in the world and everywhere in the world, even in places where we talk about the decline of Christianity. God is at work in the UK. And when you know that, and you know that you're actually participating in a privilege, we've been invited to participate in something that he's already doing. When you know that, you just have a lot of confidence that God is doing it. So understanding that this message in itself is powerful, then it really gives you the encouragement to keep going. Yeah.
Wow. What gospel needs can an African believer meet in a context like yours?
Yeah, many. When you move around, majority of the people that you will meet will be needing the gospel. Whether it is, in the community, in the neighborhood, most of the people are not Christians. And also, most of the people have not really engaged with the message of the gospel in a way that they can understand. They will know about Christianity, but not really what the message is. So, usually people think, because generally Europe is known to be Christian. We do know that there's a decline, but it's known to be a Christian region. You would think that people understand the gospel message. They have just not wanted it, but actually many people do not understand. So that everywhere you go, you will find that people are not Christians. You ask children in a Sunday school, do you have, how many of you in your class are Christians? And they will say, maybe one other person, they're not even sure, they go to church or something like that. So there's a lot of need. Everywhere you turn, you find people that are not Christians. And I'm talking about the indigenous peoples, but also there's another need because of the worldwide migration that has been happening. There are people that come from countries where you would need creative access, and also they have least exposure to the gospel message. And those people are here. And there's freedom of religion in the UK, meaning you can share the gospel with people that you would not have had an opportunity to share the gospel with, or you would have to travel and find very creative ways to enter and share the gospel. So there are many needs and opportunities, therefore, to share the gospel with people of different cultures and ethnicities.
Thank you. So there is a need, and if you're a Christian in the diaspora, in the West, or in any other context that is not the African context, there's a need, and you can find a way to meet that gospel need. I know that you were in student ministry for a while, and then you shifted gears into missions. I don't know if shifting gears is the correct term, but I would want to ask, why missions? What really got you into missions? What was that button that lit in your head, like, this is it?
Yeah, so when I was in the university, I had the privilege of meeting with a mentor that discipled me systematically. I had received a lot of discipleship from my church, back at home, and from secondary school, my Christian Union patrons. But when I went to the university, and I went through systematic discipleship, and that was a very significant time for me, because I learned how to pray for myself, how to read the Bible, and grow, And then after university, I joined a 1-year internship, ministry training in discipleship. In that time, I learned a lot about discipleship, and then I joined the ministry and I was involved in student discipleship in universities for 4 years. Yeah. But in that 1 year of discipleship, part of the curriculum was a 1-week mission training through the Kairos course. And that was the first time that I understood mission in the way that I understand now. I began to understand that time. And there was a lot of soul searching. There was a lot of things that happened in terms of my engagement with God in those 4 years that after that I was working with students. And I just realized that you cannot talk comprehensively about discipleship without talking about mission. What God is doing is actually saving the nations, and you have got to be involved in all that God is doing. And so that's how I got to be involved in mission. And so What I am involved in now is missional discipleship. Missional discipleship is just differentiating just slightly to say that, it's not, discipleship is not just about us being, changed from within, knowing Christ as best as we can. It's also outward looking. It's not just inward looking, it's also outward looking. And that's part of being made more like Christ, because he came as a missionary. Yeah, that's what that's a kind of calling that he has called us to. Yeah.
That is very interesting. Missional discipleship. I'm feeling like it is giving me like 50 other questions. But then again, we might be here for the next 24 hours if I continue getting questions from your answers. But thank you very much for sharing your experience with us, for sharing your life, what you're doing right now, your experience. Thank you very much. Now, if you were to mobilize the Africans in the diaspora for the next 30 seconds, what would you say?
I would say that we have been invited as children of God to the greatest thing that is happening on earth. God is saving people. God is transforming communities. God is transforming societies. And we are here where we are surrounded by these people, many people that are desperate for the gospel. It is a privilege to be invited like this. And therefore, I believe it's a great tragedy to miss out on it. So I would like to encourage everyone that is here in the UK or find themselves somewhere else to consider that God has, wherever God takes us as Christians, he takes us so that we can be salt and light. And so and he is worthy. He is worthy of any sacrifice that we will make in learning the culture. He is worthy of any sacrifice that we'll make in getting immersed in the community, knowing people and sharing the gospel. And we will see him at work the more we get involved in this. So let's take up the challenge. It is our heritage. Yeah.
Wow, it is a tragedy to miss it out or to miss out on it. That was very powerful. Thank you very much, Harriet, Ngugi, and may the Lord give you fruit for your labor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mercy, for having me. Yeah, it was a good time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.